How you doing, folks? It's Nick here, and today I'm going to show you how to replace a car stereo in a 2005 Daihatsu Copen. These instructions will cover pretty much every type of car that uses a DIN radio set. Some of them will come with adapters for the electrical parts of the connectors between your head unit and the car itself, but most of them don't. They will follow the standard connectors for pretty much every kind of car. Another few cars will have different fascia plates that you're going to have to use because it'll look not nice otherwise. Thankfully, in this car it's relatively straightforward, and the only tools you're going to need are a Phillips head screwdriver and a trim removal tool. In this case I'm using the end of a teaspoon because it has rounded edges and I don't want to scuff up the trim itself. This fascia plate here around the dash itself, because that's quite expensive to replace. So let's get going. In this car you can access the trim by opening the glove box and feeling in here behind the glove box itself. Up the very top right hand corner you will have a clip, and it's a bit fiddly, but it should just pop out with a small bit of effort if I can actually find the damn thing. And there we go. So using your spoon or your trim removal tool, go in and feel across to pull out the clips. You can see right there is one clip. You want to work from top to bottom, gently prying out all of the clips. Get out. There we go. And then work your way down the sides. Now, in the Daihatsu Copen you have to be very careful not to break the trim clips down the bottom. You'll see why in a second if I can fit it in. In the Copen itself, I've found it's easier to do this if you are sitting in the passenger seat and not the driver's seat, as it's quite fiddly with the steering wheel in the way. There we go. So, I don't know if you're able to see that, but as you can see the fascia plate just pops off, and we can see that the radio head unit itself is held in with two screws here on the left hand side and two screws here on the right hand side. The bottom ones are recessed fairly deep in, so you will need a long enough screwdriver to be able to do this. Now you can use an electric screwdriver. Just be sure that if you have one, it's clutched so you don't strip the heads off the top of the screws. Magnetic one is also going to come in very handy, as the screws, especially if you're doing this one-handed, have a habit of falling on you. Get out. Okay, so that's the first screw off. I'm going to put them into the ashtray to keep them safe, and it is just a matter of removing the remaining screws so that you can pull the fascia out. Okay, so I've removed the four screws holding the head unit into place, and now we can remove the head unit. You need to be very careful here in the Copen because the wire that connects the clock to the power line is just here, and this can easily be removed with your fingers or with the spoon as well if you have it. It's a bit fiddly to try to do this one-handed, so I will pause the video and come back when I have removed the top bit. I've removed the top clip that gives the clock its power. You can just see it here next to the standard radio connectors that every car has. Now, when you're removing the radio in the back, you're probably going to see something like this connector here. That is the aerial for the radio, and it should just be an easy matter of pulling it out. Again, doing this one-handed is quite annoying, so I'm just going to pause the video. Okay, so the aerial has been disconnected. As you can see, it looks a bit like a weird-ass nipple. And we can also see the wiring harness here. Now, you're going to need your spoon again, or a trim removal tool. I have no idea where I put my spoon. Oh, fuck. Where did I put my spoon? Can you see my spoon anywhere? Ah, there it is. So, we get the spoon and we push it into these little connectors here. Not really connectors, into the hole here that holds the connector firmly in place. You pop both of these out. They can only ever go into the correct connector on your new head unit. They're designed in such a way that you can't accidentally plug it into the wrong hole. So there's no need to worry about damaging the radio by plugging it into the wrong hole and causing electricity to go where it shouldn't. So the next part is just going to be removing these, and as I said, it's very easy. You push them in and pull them out with the other hand. And again, because you need two hands, I'm going to have to pause the video again, so apologies for that. A grand total of 4 seconds to pop these two connectors out, and now, as you can see, there is absolutely nothing connecting. Apologies for the fact that the camera doesn't auto-focus correctly when it's in recording mode. This is why you need a proper camera to do this sort of work if you're going to document it. So I have completely removed the ends of the stereo. We don't need to worry about those two wires, and as we can see the few different ones. So you have like your aerial, your power, and the power for the clock. So now it is time to remove the radio from the actual harness itself. As you can see, it's held in by one screw down here at the bottom right of it, and two on this side of it. I don't know why it's 1 and 2, but it is, and it just literally just slides out. It's incredibly easy to do. It just slides out. You slide the new one in. You might need a harness for the new one, which I have, just because sometimes the radios are quite small, but they're smaller than the harness itself, and an awful lot of them will include a harness just to be on the safe side. So next thing to do is unscrew this. Okay, so we have removed the head unit from the dash itself, and this is the new head unit. So what we're going to do is, basically, you see these tiny little holes? We're going to line up everything with the tiny holes so that it all becomes flush. These little tabs should fit into the holes, and then after that you basically screw up to make sure everything's nice and tight, and then we'll proceed on to the next step. So I will show you what it's like just afterwards. Now, you want to try to get these in both the same holes as possible, so that the front of the head unit is nice and flush. In this case, it's going to stick out by about half an inch, 2 centimeters, a centimeter to about half an inch out from the dash, and that's basically the way I want it anyway. So you, as I said, you find the holes, you stick them in, and then you screw everything up. So that will be the next step. Okay, so I have screwed everything into the little holes here and here. You can see where the little lugs click in. There's one there, and if this would zoom in correctly, you can see one there. Again, apologies for the fact that this camera doesn't autofocus while recording videos. So that's on the left side, and on the right side the exact same. So the next thing, in the back, we will see that we have the ISO connectors, and as I said, they can only sit in one way. There's no possibility of them being able to fit in, to plug the wrong one into the wrong hole. If you can see there, the top one, its little groove is kind of in the middle, and the bottom one, the groove is in the bottom. And then this on the right hand side is the aerial connector. Now, you will note on this car stereo, at least, there's no fuse. So if the car stereo, generally car stereos will have 1 or 2 fuses, 15 amp, 1 amp, maybe 1 amp, 5 amp or 10 amp fuse in the back of it to protect the head unit in the event mainly of jump starting, which can blow a few fuses. Now, the fuse will There's already a fuse for the car stereo in the car itself, but most manufacturers will put one in anyway, just as a safety factor in case your car doesn't happen to have one. So I'd recommend, if you're going to be replacing your car stereo, to look and make sure that it actually has a user replaceable fuse. Maybe this one does and I haven't found it. It could be hidden in the back somewhere underneath all these screws, but I haven't found it yet. So then the next step is going to be fitting this in, and I'm going to start off with the ISO connectors first, because they're considerably easier to put in than the damn aerial. So we're going to stick these in, the ISO connectors, then the aerial, and then we will mount the car stereo. There's not enough give in this clock power lead to or the aerial itself. There's a small bit of give in the aerial itself, to be able to do this one-handed. Again, I do apologise. I will see about mounting this, because I'm going to be replacing this car stereo again anyway. So I'll see about trying to mount the camera somewhere so you can actually see what I'm doing. So yes, the next step is wire everything up. It can only ever go in one way, so don't worry about anything. So everything's wired up with the exception of the clock at the top. As I said, the ISO connectors are incredibly easy to put in. You can't put them in the wrong way around. The aerial is the only thing that's going to look like that aerial connector, the thing that looks a bit like a penis, or an incredibly deformed nipple. It's the only thing that can ever fit into these holes, so you shouldn't have to worry too much. As I said, your car might need an ISO to whatever stereo connector you have, or more than likely the other way around, your car to ISO converter. So the next step is to put the clock power lead in, and then push everything back, re-screw everything back in, and put the fascia back on. So the next thing you'll probably see is me screwing the car stereo back in. So back in a sec. It's actually probably a good idea before you mount everything up. Well, it is a good idea before you mount everything up to make sure it actually works. So I'm going to go to the accessory position. So the clock, you'll see, will start up, and we should have, I have no idea how to turn this damn thing on. That maybe? No? Power, come on. Now this is why you want to make sure that you have wired everything up, because apparently I haven't wired everything up correctly, and it would be quite annoying if I had wired everything up, or screwed everything back up again, and it decided it didn't want to power on. So I'd say what probably happened is one of the cables isn't seated correctly. So pull her back out, seat the cables correctly, and hopefully she'll power on. So she powers on fine. It turns out that the connector wasn't seated correctly. I might also add, I forgot to say this at the beginning of the video, you need to make sure that the car is in the off position. I wouldn't even have the key in the ignition, even in the off position, just be on the safe side. An awful lot of people say that you should remove the negative terminal on the battery, but I don't really see the point in doing that, to be perfectly honest with you. So I have screwed in all 4 screws, and the next step is pushing the trim back on. This is a really straightforward, incredibly straightforward. It basically works from the bottom up, the reverse of what you've already done. And you just go click, 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 click. So click, click. It can be a bit stubborn, but you need to make sure not to break your trim clips. And there, done. It's a really easy, cheap thing to do yourself. I know there's a few motor factors, for example, who will charge you about €10, €15 to install a car stereo. I wouldn't bother, to be perfectly honest with you. If you can find a service manual or a YouTube video of someone who's done this themselves in their own car, or even pictures of how to do it, it's going to be far more easier for you to do it and not break your trim, as opposed to someone who probably doesn't know an awful lot about how to do this, to be perfectly honest with you. So that's it. It takes about 15 minutes from start to finish, if you know what you're doing. Probably less if you know what you're doing. So it's not overly complicated. Now, one thing that you might see in different car stereos is a DIN. So you'll have single DIN, which means one of these little units, or doubled in, which would be 2 of the units. I think what I'm going to do next, in the next video, is probably install a doubled in unit. Maybe I will, for the next how to install a car stereo video, install a doubled in unit, and I can pull power off of the clock here, which is tied into the accessory position in the key. So there's an awful lot of room that you can do there. It will involve having to splice cables depending on what I want to do with it exactly, so we'll see about that. But I will be redoing this video in a few weeks anyway, how to installing another car stereo in this exact same car. It is completely pointless that I've actually done this.